All right, we're going to have a look at Newspoll now. It's a shocker today for the Prime Minister. In particular, his personal vote's under pressure alongside that of the Labor Party. In terms of primary vote, Labor sits 6 points behind the coalition at 38 to 32. Two-party preferred terms, both parties are now neck and neck, 50-50, for a second straight month. And the Prime Minister's net satisfaction slumped to the equal lowest level since he took office. That's a negative 13. For more on this and the other big issues of the day, I'm joined now by Sky News political reporter Cameron Reddin and Sky News host, National Affairs editor at the Daily Telegraph, James Morrow. Well, gentlemen, welcome. Cam, despite the billions they spent in May in the budget to win over voters, they're now stuck in dangerous territory, aren't they? And the PM's weakness on big issues like the Visa for Votes scandal, I think in those numbers you see the evaporation of trust and I think a scorecard from punters on competency.
Well, simply not enough's going right for the government at the moment, Peter. We even think back 12 months after the Voice went down, there seemed to be this loss of momentum. The government limped its way into Christmas and then the Prime Minister tried to hit the reset button and go full-on cost of living from January. You've got a bit of a similar sort of feeling at this point in the year now. They've had a rough week brawling with traditional Labor allies, the likes of the unions, the university sector, the handling of the census question didn't help either. Inflation is sticking around. This poll today, not good either. We also learned in the last 90 minutes or so, Peter, that the Prime Minister has now lost his media director. He's off to go work for DFAT. It's the second change there in the space of 9 months in that role, a critical position in the Prime Minister's office when you're trying to get the message out and convince people to vote for you in the space of 9 months. And as for those numbers you laid out in Newspoll there, look, I suppose anyone can win it from 50-50. The election's there from the taking, but a minority government still seems like the most likely outcome here. And 9 months from going to the polls in a first term, it's certainly not the position that the government would want to be in.
I have to say, press secs are very political roles, and the fact that the press sec is now going into the bowels of the department to work for foreign affairs shows how politicised this bureaucracy is under Labor. That's a digression there. James, over the weekend I wrote that the government has blocked a major project on these trumped-up heritage grounds. It allowed hospitals to almost run dry on IV fluids. It's got migrants coming in from an active war zone, no security checks. The problem for this Prime Minister is his entire life he's lived in a hard left bubble. He's now in the Canberra bubble. Even his milk gets bought by the housekeeper at the lodge. I mean, I think he's completely lost touch with the real world.
Well, yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that, Peter. And you think about Anthony Albanese's biography. Here's a guy who, he says, proudly he grew up in public housing and all of these sorts of things and, very real world sort of visceral kind of childhood, and good on him. But it seems like ever since then, he's spent his entire life, as you suggest, in government, working for the taxpayer, very little contact with the real world. The same thing, too, if you look at Tanya Plibersek with her career. Again, basically her entire career working for the taxpayer. Again, this bubble, and so many other ministers on that front bench of Labor, again, entirely within the Labor bubble. That's why they don't see the consequences. That's why they can be like, you can just move your tailings dam from here to there, can't you? What's the big deal? Not understanding what goes into that, and that there's hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars invested in these sorts of projects and the message that it sends. It's a terrible thing, this bubble, because it's isolating the government from the people as well. And I think that's why you saw that resignation of Brett Mason from the press office there, is because they're so deeply involved in that bubble that they don't know how to communicate anymore, I think, with real Australia.
You talk about him living in social housing and that's his only reference to sort of being in the real world, but that was 50 years ago.
Exactly.
And I think that's going to come under greater scrutiny as he gets into the election. In and out of limousines, million-dollar mansions. I know every Prime Minister lives in those places, but, unlike Tony Abbott, he's not out there still at the fire brigade. He's not connected with real people. The hard left Labor sort of apparatchik that he is, that's his friend group, that's his mates, that's where he spends his time. And I think it shows. And then you look at Jim Chalmers. I mean, coming out and attacking the Reserve Bank, saying that they're smashing the economy. This says to me, Cam, he's trying to take out a little bit of insurance ahead of that data we expect to see on Wednesday that says, we're basically ground to a halt in economic growth terms.
Yeah, the numbers are going to be shocking on Wednesday, Peter. They're set to confirm Australia's economy growing as slow as it did, if you take COVID out of the equation, since the early 1990s. And, of course, the recession Paul Keating said that we had to have. But what we've really seen today, in the most maybe explicit way it has been to date, is the Treasurer trying to wrestle back control of the economic narrative. But I think that really goes back to a fundamental difference now between the Reserve Bank and the Treasurer in how they think Australia's economy is faring right now. Remember the little dispute that came public about 2-3 weeks ago now? The Reserve Bank said, look, the economy is running a bit hot. They were pointing to inflation. And within about an hour, I think it was beforehand, but the point stands, the Treasurer said, no, the economy is not running hot at all. And he was pointing to GDP and slow economic growth. So somehow the Gallagher brothers from Oasis have found common ground. The Treasurer and the RBA can't on the basic state of the economy. That is a problem. And when you're trying to sell a narrative and say people, hey, we're on top of this economic situation, that's difficult if the messaging isn't the same page.
And they're desperate with their messaging. I listened to them over the weekend. They're all out there crowing, Labor ministers and front benches, that they've just helped people out with more money for rent assistance, more money for job seeker. James Morrow, this is the automatic standard indexation that happens under all governments at all times. It shows how under pressure they are on cost of living, though.
Yeah, it shows that they're under pressure, Peta, and it also shows how out of ideas they are on anything about actually reforming the economy, right? Because all we've got here is, hey, you're getting more money if you're in this category or that category, or pensioner or whatever. You're getting more money. Fine, okay. But that's just indexation, as you say. At the same time, what are they doing? Well, we're going to just throw some money at your power bills. But they aren't doing anything to actually bring power prices down in any real term. They aren't doing anything to make the workplace more flexible. In fact, they've gone exactly the opposite road to that. So every single thing that they're doing is actually making the situation worse. And then to crow about this indexation, well, I mean, the only thing that we really need to be talking about indexing right now are the tax rates so that we don't get this monstrous bracket creep, which is one of the things that's also crushing the economy.
James, before we go, I've got to ask you about this interview on Friday. Kamala Harris, Tim Walz sat down. First official, could be the only official interview we're going to see. I thought this response from the Vice President, obviously candidate now, spoke volumes. Have a listen.
If you are elected, what would you do on day one in the White House?
Well, there are a number of things. I will tell you, first and foremost, one of my highest priorities is to do what we can to support and strengthen the middle class. When I look at the aspirations, the goals, the ambitions of the American people, I think that people are ready for a new way forward.
First of all, it looked like she was in a police interview and she had, Tim Walz sitting there like her lawyer, ready to jump in if she got herself into trouble. But what leader doesn't know what they want to do day one in the top job?
Well, I mean, seriously, Peter, you've worked on countless political campaigns. You know this. The first thing that a candidate's going to be asked is, what will you do on day one? She looked like Bart Simpson giving that book report on Treasure Island when he hadn't read the book. She didn't know what she was talking about. It was all just, motherhood statements and such. Beyond that, though, she's got a big problem here because, day one was really 3.5 years ago for Kamala Harris. She's been in that White House for almost 4 years now as the vice president. So what's she going to be doing now? Running from the Biden-Harris record? This is a huge problem, I think, for her. This is why we probably won't see another big interview, if we can call that an interview. And we may even see her figure out or confect some way to get out of the coming debate.
Gents, thank you.